class, we're going to talk about the poems from Poetries 2.1 and 2.2. I'm going to do so as quickly as I can. First thing to understand is that when two poems are put together on an AP test for the sake of comparison, it's because they share some kind of quality. They either share a technique, a topic, or a theme. The most common you'll see is a shared subject, that both poems are about the same basic thing for different reasons. Speaking of shared subjects, a noiseless patient spider and a considerable speck have the shared quality of both being about rather insignificant animals. They also both are symbolic poems in which the spider and the speck symbolize something bigger than themselves. In a noiseless patient spider, we're talking about a spider that is being compared to the soul. Both spider and soul spend their time shooting forth filament, or ceaselessly venturing and musing, trying to make connections in the world. For the considerable speck, the speaker, who is a writer, sees on his sheet a small insect and considers for a moment blotting it out of existence, but ultimately chooses not to, letting it live because it sees in it some spark of intelligence. This idea of a much larger, more powerful being looking down on a smaller, more insignificant being and deciding with some sense of sympathy to let it exist is the idea of God looking down on man. There's also a bit of self-deprecation in this poem, as Frost suggests that the speck itself reads his writing with loathing and tries to get away from it, and Frost says, plainly with an intelligence I dealt. Loveliest of trees and stopping by woods on a snowy evening both deal with trees and woods as their shared symbolic subject. For A.E. Housman, though, in The Loveliest of Trees, he talks about how he has only 50 years left to enjoy the beauty of nature, which is to say he only has 50 years left to enjoy the beauty of life. Frost's speaker, on the other hand, says that he has miles to go before he sleeps, emphasizing the amount of time he has yet still to live, and suggests that he has promises to keep. The woods, who probably belong to God and are an invitation towards a warm and comforting death in the embrace of God, are a distraction which he and his symbolic horse suggest they are not yet ready to take because they have things yet to do. On to 2.2. First two poems here are Rhodora and Design, both of which use natural elements, in one case a flower, in the other case a spider catching a moth, to suggest the power of God's creation and his design. For Rhodora, the speaker ironically suggests that he has the answer to why the flower is tucked away in the middle of the woods. It's because he was there too, and so God's great design was to put a flower there for him to see. For Robert Frost's speaker in Design, he has some skepticism and some fear about seeing this cleverly camouflaged spider perched at a very particular height so that he may catch the moth, and his language is much more negative and frightened about it, suggesting that if there is a design, it is a design of darkness, and then offers at the very end the caveat that perhaps there is no design to such small things in the universe, which opens up the question to an omnipotent being, how significant is a human being versus a spider? Emily Dickinson's poems seem fairly straightforward in their comparison. In I Never Saw a Moor, she suggests that you do not have to see something such as heaven to be certain of its existence. But in Faith is a Fine Invention, she suggests that microscopes, metonymically related to science as a whole, are prudent in an emergency, suggesting that faith may not be enough. Now, the important part about this is the same poet writing two contrasting viewpoints, and she is totally allowed to, totally entitled to. A poet and a speaker are not the same thing. You should not assume that a speaker's views are necessarily the poet's. The speaker is just a character created by the poet. Finally, O Sweet Spontaneous versus When I Heard the Learned Astronomer both share themes. These poems are both about the difficulty man has in defining the universe, especially when we rely on human constructs to do so. For E.E. Cummings, he uses his style, which is, of course, very free-flowing and irregular, to discuss why philosophy, science, and religion all fail to define the universe, and when the earth wants to tell us how to understand life, it answers only with spring, which is both a time of beauty and temperate climates, but also a symbol of life and rebirth. For Whitman's speaker in When I Heard the Learned Astronomer, he goes and seeks out an expert in understanding the universe, an astronomer, but is bored by his facts and his figures and his endless lecture, and instead goes out into the mystical, moist night air to enjoy in perfect silence the stars. Both of these suggest that there is a superior natural understanding to the way the world works and the way the universe works that cannot be defined by science. There you go, all 10 poems from 2.1 and 2.2 in a nutshell. Hope this helped. You might be ready for the quiz now.
Together, darling, you're not alone. But when you break up, sky's falling, no one is on your side.